Awesome. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining here today. We're going to give everyone just a minute or two here to trickle in before we jump in and get started, but super excited to get into the content focused on connecting finance, workforce, and the store floor for retail organizations. So just give us a minute or two here while we wait for folks to trickle in, and then we'll jump into the content today. Awesome. Well, now I think we've got a good crew here on the line. So super excited to be jumping into our conversation today, connecting finance, workforce, and the store floor for retail organizations. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us. By way of introduction, my name is Alex, and I am one of our account executives here at Okorio, and I'll be walking you through today how we're seeing retail organizations modernize their planning, specifically how they're connecting finance, their headcount, and what's actually happening at a store level. So our goal today is pretty simple. We just want to make this practical. So not just what adaptive planning is doing, but how it actually enables you and your teams to make better, faster decisions. So a quick product statement before we get into the meat and potatoes today. Really the core here is we just ask that you make any and all purchasing decisions based off of the readily available functionality in the tool today. So if we do discuss any unreleased features, functionality, or enhancements in the tool, please take that into consideration based off of what we have readily available. Quick intro to our team that you'll hear from here today. So again, my name is Alex Bell, and I focus on working with retail and consumer organizations on their planning strategy here at Okorio. I'm joined by Matt Harbison today, who leads our planning practice for adaptive planning, and he's been involved in hundreds of implementations and really knows the tool inside and out. So he'll be leading our demonstration here today and helping advise on what he's seen at the actual customer level of how our customers utilize the tool. Additionally, I have Joanna from Workday here today, who supports specifically the retail and consumer organization space as well, who will bring the product perspective to today's conversation. So between the three of us, we'll have you covered on both the why and the how. We're here to show you today how organizations utilize the tool. So just a quick overview on what we'll cover. First, I'm going to pass the floor over to Joanna here shortly, who's going to set the stage with a little bit of context on why planning is evolving so quickly, especially in the retail space, and how Workday supports its customers there. Then we'll talk about what we set out to solve today, who this is really built for, and from there, we'll jump into the demo to bring it all to life. And of course, we'll leave time for questions at the end. So there is a Q&A box. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop those in there, and we'll make sure to touch on them at the end of today's presentation. Awesome. So I'll pass the floor over to Joanna here to set the stage.
Thank you, Alex. Joanna Science-Donnell. As Alex mentioned, I'm an account executive here at Workday Adaptive Planning. For the past 4 years, I've been empowering retail organizations to streamline their FP&A processes. So first, let's talk through finance's challenge, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, which is the ability to deliver your forecasts, and I'm sure increasing leadership demands to scenario plan in this ever-changing macroeconomic environment versus the time that it takes, right? FP&A is under increasing pressure between adjusting for economic uncertainty, incorporating more data analysis than ever before, et cetera. It's tough to keep up, especially if the tools that you're using aren't agile and require manual work or IT interaction to keep up with the change. And unfortunately, that gap is going to continue to widen if you don't have an agile planning platform. So on the next piece, we'll talk through how Workday Adaptive Planning can empower your organization. Here's what really differentiates us. One, we give you more time for strategic analysis. We have incomparable adaptability and end of user use. Essentially, you'll spend less time data crunching and more time being able to strategize and deliver actionable insights to your leadership organization. Second, we deliver fast answers to complex questions through flexible modeling, unlimited scenarios, embedded AI and ML capabilities, so that the next time you're running a scenario, incorporating a change in a strategy, etc., you can make that change really quickly or run a machine learning version to get immediate answers. And the third piece, performance without compromise. Adaptive has the power to scale, and it provides the flexibility FP&A teams need. Other planning systems might deliver ease of use, but they aren't powerful or scalable to handle company-wide planning. Still, others deliver power, but are anything but easy to use. So if you don't have all three, power, scale, and flexibility, your team will spend their time managing disconnected models rather than providing the insights your leaders need. And the last piece, we're a partner that you can trust and service you can rely on, as we're the market-leading planning solution. We have the largest planning customer community. We have over 7,000 customers, 28% are Fortune 500. We've received accolades from Trust Radius. We've been Gartner's Customer Choice for 4 years in a row, Constellation Shortlist for planning applications, etc. And we're raising the standard for service. So with us, from an experience standpoint, we deliver 95% on-time deployment. 40% plus of our features come directly from customer feedback. From a support standpoint, we have a global support team that's available 24/7, 365 days a week. And from an operations standpoint, we have the single best-in-class SLA, and we continuously deliver innovation. And we have the hashtag We Plan That, because on the next slide, you can see all of the various retail and direct-to-consumer organizations that utilize adaptive planning. But from the moment you get in your vehicle, you put gas, the clothing you wear, the food you eat, etc., adaptive planning is involved in those planning solutions. So next, I'll pass it over to Alex. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. So to pull that all together, when we think about what great really looks like when it comes to planning, and specifically for organizations similar to yourself in the retail space, it's about connecting areas across finance, workforce, and operations to be able to plan at a more granular level. So bringing in things like store, SKU, or channel to our plan, and enabling real-time scenario modeling, so that instead of asking questions about like a look back, like what did we do last month, what happened last month, we can start asking questions that have a forward-facing impact to our organization. So what happens if we change our pricing? What if demand shifts occur? What happens if we open or close stores? And really start to get those answers immediately. So that's where we see some of the biggest impact for our customers there. And in terms of the common challenges that they face, this really comes directly from what we hear from our customers every day after they've moved on, or what we heard from our customers every day prior to moving on to adaptive planning, is that most retail organizations are dealing with Excel-driven planning processes that are slow and manual in nature. They have disconnected systems and overall have difficulty collaborating across the business to have an up-to-date view of the business. So again, one of the biggest challenges is that all of these pieces are living in different places. So even if each team is doing their job well independently, finance, operations, sales, HR, they're not always aligned. And that's where planning really can break down. So the goal is not just better planning, but more connected planning. So adaptive planning, it's not just a finance solution, it's really built for cross-functional teams. So you think about finance leaders, store operations, supply chain, all of these groups contribute to the plan in some way and do rely on it. So instead of finance owning planning in isolation, it becomes a more collaborative process across the business when you introduce an enterprise planning system. So as we take a look or a glimpse into the strategic planning at a store level today, I do want you to keep in mind all of the other ways that your business plans, as Adaptive is truly an enterprise planning solution. So with that, I'm going to pass the floor over to Matt Harbison, who's going to really bring this to life for us today as we focus on planning at the store level and the impacts there. But stay plugged in with us as we are planning to run a series of webinars focused on other topics like tariff impacts, inventory planning, and more. So just keep that in mind as we go through today's demonstration.
Absolutely. Appreciate that lead in there, Alex, and the introduction as well. Before I dive in, just want to ask, Alex, just want to confirm you're able to see my screen over here, see Workday Adaptive Planning. I know that we switched screens over here. Is everyone able to see it okay?
Yep, absolutely. We've got it.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. So I know Alex mentioned that I do lead our adaptive planning practice at Okorio, have been involved in a lot of implementations, and I can say without a doubt, some of my favorite implementations have been whenever we are dealing with our retail customers, specifically those who are looking to achieve store level sales planning, store level variable labor forecasting as well. So what you can see pulled up on the screen for us here today is actually what we've built after hundreds of implementations and learning best practices, making recommendations for our customers for store specific planning. So you can see inside of Adaptive, inside of this dashboard, typically I'm going to work left to right, summary, then get into store specifications, all the way through performance. So we build our dashboards in order to let our actual store sales team and our store managers be involved in the planning process. The reason we do that is, we find that it helps keep stores in control, helps keep them engaged in the planning process. More importantly, helps keep them accountable for what they are coming to, with their plan with. So inside of this dashboard, they're going to be able to put in things like forecasted expected sales, be able to put in changes to non-labor related expenses, be able to put changes into their variable forecasts for labor and for staffing. But it all starts out really high level on this front summary tab that we're seeing here with direct access to all of the most important KPIs that they may have for their particular store. So diving into some of the drivers for things like, what does our average daily foot traffic look like? What does that look like on a weekly basis? What does spend look like in our different customer segments, those that shop during the week versus those that maybe shop over the weekend? We can continue looking at all of these different charts and graphs and metrics, but more importantly, inside of Workday Adaptive Planning, I can actually see and access all of this information down to the individual dimensionalized data. So if I wanted to look at gross margin by district or region or even by store, all I have to do is select that data and it's going to allow me to get into the rich detail underneath all of those metrics. So connected and unified planning across our stores presents our district managers and region managers a place for them to come in and have sort of that one-stop shop for all of their planning needs. Now, inside of this, KPI or the summary dashboard, yes, I'm looking at things like revenue by department or by product line or by channel, but I've also got access to my income statement here as well. So if I ever wanted to look at this by a particular clothing line or a particular part of the sale or store that we've got department based, I can do that. I can also look at what we're spending on promotions or marketing expenses. I can look at what our membership discounts look like. All of that wrapped up inside of our income statement directly here inside of our summary dashboard. Now, I want to continue moving through what this could look like on a store by store basis. But one of the most important parts that we find inside of Adaptive is we have to have sort of a store specification or store level summary dashboard that we're seeing here. So when we think about all of our stores, we want to be able to look at things like, when did the store open? Are we closing the store? Are we moving locations? All of these allow us to be able to group like stores together into regions or districts based on location, but like stores from a cluster perspective as well. Now I'm going to dive into exactly what this looks like for us inside of Workday Adaptive Planning, but these clusters with the green check mark on the bottom right-hand corner represent for us derived dimensions, which allows us the ability to group like stores together. So if I'm looking at a particular cluster, let me sort this by group. Cluster A here for us, as you can see, these are maybe on the smaller side of our stores, express stores with smaller addressable market. So instead of looking at just region or district against each other, I can actually look at this store compared to another store similar size in a different district or region whenever we want to look at store performance or COGS or staffing requirements. The same can be said at the other end of the spectrum as well if we wanted to look at some of our larger stores. Maybe we wanted to start to look at superstores compared against each other. So derived dimensions inside of Workday Adaptive Planning allows us to do cluster analysis or cohort analysis to be able to group like stores together to monitor performance based against its peers in the district or in the region. Now, after we go through our store specifications, we can start to get into looking at what do our sales look like. Sales, again, for us are looking at gross sales. It could be breaking that down by important KPIs for us, like gross sales by square foot that we see here as well. Now, it's at this point where I want to start to get into maybe not so much looking at just our KPIs, but starting to get into some of the planning that Joanna was talking about with the volatility that we see out there. One of the strengths of Workday Adaptive Planning is not just having the dashboard at our fingertips, not just being able to have the planning model at our fingertips, but being able to model what if scenarios as well. So in this example, I'm going to go from retail planning on the top right-hand corner where I open up my versions. I'm going to select a new scenario, and this is going to be titled here for us, webinar. And I'm going to create this scenario. Now, inside of Workday Adaptive Planning, what I'm doing is I'm spinning up an ad hoc or a what if scenario that is actually a direct child of the underlying planning version that we've got. That lets me know that I'm still starting out with the baseline of what my plan was. So think of annual operating plan or monthly or quarterly reforecast that we have. But this what if scenario allows us to make tweaks or changes without impacting what that baseline version is. So as an example, maybe I'm coming in and looking at my sales or looking at, in this case, I can see that I've got some sales assumptions. So let's open some of these up and take a look at some of the data that we're seeing. So inside of this model, I'm looking at different service lines that we have. In this case, I'm going to say, here's service line, and I'm going to just drag that onto a store for us. So store 1001. Now I've got all of these different service lines or average sales per customer, all of these different sort of facts about this particular store. But on the top of my dashboard, I'm actually able to click in and drill in and get more information or more detail here. And you can see that I can continue clicking or filtering or going down into more and more detail so that I could actually start to make some changes or tweaks inside of this webinar version. So if we're going to say that our average sales per customer Monday through Thursday is $15 in the clothing department or women's clothing department, maybe we want to make some change to what that number is. Maybe we say it's $18. Now we can set it in adaptive where we can make a change and it's going to automatically impact all of our forward-facing numbers as well. Or we can just go in and make a change to a single value. In this case, the first week of the month, we're just going to make a quick change. And as an example, saving this change, you can see that I've made a tweak or made a change inside of my what if scenario. It's highlighted, letting me know that we've got a deviation from our underlying or original plan. And I want to keep that, sort of the change that we've put in there. But you can see that as I'm going through the plan, or as I'm going through all of the changes or all of the tweaks that we're making, it's tracking all of those changes and all of those differences. So as an example, we just made a change to some of those sales assumptions. What if we have some changes that maybe go beyond just looking at what we're forecasting our expected, our expected sales are going to be for our Monday through Thursday customers? Now, some of those changes that we may want to look at are things that would impact maybe variable staffing as an example. So in this case, I'm looking at a role of specialists, maybe somebody who works in a clearance department. Again, I'm just going to open this up really quickly for us to be able to drill into some underlying or overall assumptions that we've got. But in this case, again, looking at particular stores and looking at maybe store 1001 again, we want to say that we're going to be making a tweak or making a change to what our variable forecasting needs are going to be. Well, a lot of you who are listening today, maybe base your variable staffing or variable forecasted staffing needs based off of something like foot traffic. Foot traffic for us inside of Workday Adaptive Planning, we can actually leverage a few different things for that. First, what we like to do is we actually will start by generating a machine learning forecast inside of the tool. Now, this is native, readily available technology inside of Workday Adaptive Planning. But as you can see, I've spun up just a new forecast here for us, or a new machine learning forecast, to be able to generate the predicted machine learning forecast or predicted foot traffic based off of the machine learning forecast. So in this webinar example, I'm going into my demand generation, submitting a retail planning version for maybe expected foot traffic changes over the next 6 months. Now, inside of Adaptive, I can't, or I don't only have to look at historic information, be able to predict a future forecast, but I can also look at pulling in outside levers as well. So we can use algorithms or tools inside of Adaptive, such as Profit or some of our auto fits, but to be able to leverage in something like daily weather. So in the store planning space, specifically for retail, we know that sales are impacted based off of weather, whether that's positive or negative, right? If we think that people are going to be less likely to shop our store based off of if it's a rainy day, we can actually have that impact what our foot traffic expectations are going to be based off of weather forecasts. What this could look like for us in practice is inside of my actual demand staffing dashboard here. You can see I've got foot traffic here brought in, or daily foot traffic for the next few months, and it's actually being generated based off of events such as our weather event here as well. So looking at if we've got favorable weather days, maybe 6 per month or 7 per month or 8 per month, we can use that as a lever inside of our forecast to predict what our forward-looking foot traffic is going to be for a particular store or region based off of weather. Now, a lot of folks that we talk to inside of finance, they always say, I always want to have my hand on the steering wheel when it comes to expected foot traffic here. So what we may do is come in and say, okay, here's what our expected foot traffic is. 3,474 people are expected to come in the first week of the month in January. Maybe we go in and say there's going to be a 10% deviation to what we would expect. That's one way that we could go in, and we could have an override or keep our hand on the steering wheel to our ML forecasted output. Another way that we can go in is we can say, okay, we think that minimum staff is going to be, we have to have one person staffed at all time, or maybe we have to have 5 people staffed at all time for different positions that we have, whether that's receiving, whether that's stocking, whether that's cashiers. We could have different positions or different staffing requirements, again, making impacts or changes to what our expected foot traffic is going to be. Now, as we make those changes or as we make those tweaks, again, we're going to see the highlighted values letting us know that there's a deviation from our underlying or from our original retail plan that we have here. Now, as that store manager or as that store owner, I can continue working through my dashboard. I can continue working through different changes that I may have to different parts of my organization, whether that's looking at, our shifts, here, or staffing ladders. So looking at minimum staff requirements, again, looking at the foot traffic, helps to generate different roles that we need from our variable labor forecast. Now, there's also going to be fixed staff or maybe management or fixed positions that we have here as well. So as an example, we could have district managers or regional managers with what their annual salary may look like, and then allocate that across different stores. That way we have our variable staffing, which is very closely related or directly tied to what our costs are going to be for that store. But we can also allocate indirect costs or management related costs based off of, in this case, percentages, or it could even be based off of time spent at each one of those particular stores. So the ability to come in and make tweaks and make changes to both variable staffing as well as non-variable or our fixed or management staffing, all of that's possible inside our adaptive planning environment. Again, our store managers coming in, they're making changes not just to things like personnel, not just things like expected foot traffic, but also making changes to any type of expected costs that we have, whether that's upticks in insurance, upticks in rent expense, looking at any type of advertising that we're spending or marketing spend that we've got. We also have actual capital needs that our organization may have as well. So let me open this up here for us as well. So as a store manager, maybe we come in and we want to look at something like, let's look at shelving as an example. Shelving for us may have a particular useful life of, in this case, quick math says it's 6 years. So we could even look at, maybe by a particular store, maybe by a particular department, and be able to come in and say, okay, I know that coming up on the end of my useful life here, maybe I want to copy these 2 rows and put into service here on 4/23/2026. maybe I want to put into service a few new assets here for us. So we can keep an eye on things like shelving, um, things like cash registers, things like shopping carts. If there's any type of capital expenditure that we need to make or large expenses that we want to depreciate over time, we can go ahead and add those into our plan. So seeing here as we're making tweaks and changes again to our underlying base version, we can see that we've got changes right here for swimwear and shoes, both the shelving department. So our store manager comes in, continues making tweaks, continues making changes directly inside of this dashboard. And at the end of the day, can come in and start to look at their performance versus other stores. So a regional manager may come in here, or a district manager may come and see, okay, I'm seeing that's maybe we can see that our sales by square foot in this particular district or this particular region are less than what they are at other districts or other regions. This is where that cluster analysis or tranche analysis allows us to be able to come in and say, okay, for these that are the similar size addressable market or square footage, we want to go back and say that we're looking at cluster A versus cluster A stores, or cluster D versus cluster D stores. So store comparative reporting is made possible by the ability to make tweaks or make changes at the store level across all of our drivers, right? So with our what if scenario, it allows for agile forecasting to battle some of the challenges that Joanna was talking about with volatility. With machine learning forecast technology, it allows us to pull in weather data for us to be able to make a more informed or more accurate forward-facing forecast. And then we could start to layer in driver-based planning and model using some key drivers like foot traffic, looking at expected sales by a particular customer type. All of this allow us inside of this dashboard to be able to have that forward-looking forecast to remain agile and scalable. One of the things that I wanted to show from this point is Workday Adaptive Planning about a month ago at this point just released new functionality that I wanted to highlight in the form of what is called a planning hub. Planning hubs for us are going to allow us the ability to take dashboards, but take it one step further, where we can actually bring different dashboard views in, like I'm looking at my summary for my store planning dashboard here. You can see all of the same metrics that we were looking at before with gross margin, still clickable by store, by region. But it also allows me the ability to pull in some AI generated metrics as well. So if I wanted to see an outlook at maybe what revenue or COGS or what my gross margin is going to be looking like, AI generated summary of some of my high level KPIs. I could also include text box like we see at the top for us saying we have to complete these particular tasks. So Workday Adaptive Planning has continued to put out more and more in terms of R&D and getting us, with the semi-annual releases, functionality that is going to curate even further that store manager experience, right? So we came in and looked at summary, maybe we came in and looked at sales, or we could even start to look at our budget versus budget. So if I wanted to look at, in this case, our webinar version that we were looking at to see if there's any changes or tweaks, here's the sales for clothing for women that we expected. There's an uptick in discounts that we would expect for some of those member discounts. We can see that product cost has gone up, expenses related to depreciation expense. Let's see, here's that shelving cost coming in. So immediately able to see the changes that we had made in that what if scenario. We could do this on a store by store basis, as we can see here. We could do this again on a district by district or region by region basis. So a lot of flexibility whenever it comes into looking at budget versus budget. Now, taking this one step further, if we wanted to, we could even start to look at comparative, store comparative reporting as well. So in this case, we're going to go into my version. I'm going to click into my webinar version, refresh this here for us. Now I'm looking at all of my sales, all of sales adjustments and COGS on a store by store basis. Now, inside of Workday Adaptive Planning, we have the ability to curate this view for our users to be specific to their particular groups of stores. So let's say that Alex is a district manager for District 1, would only be able to come in and see maybe this particular district. Joanna may be a regional manager, so can see all of stores 1001, 1002. So having curated access to your specific stores so you can come in and say, okay, something doesn't feel right or something feels off, or let's start to dig into what our gross margin looks like at a store level basis. Now, again, taking it a step further, one of the things that Workday Adaptive Planning has recently come out with is the ability for Ask Workday or the planning agent as well. So we can actually do this store comparative reporting, open up our planning agent on the right-hand side and say things like maybe summarize this report, or if we wanted to detect anomalies. So what this is going to do is it's going to analyze the report. It's going to analyze all of my store by store basis. It's going to go in and look at all of the sales, all of the adjustments, all of the COGS, and then compare each one of these columns against the others to see if there's any outliers or see if there's anything that it would deem as an anomaly. So it's scouring all of that information, being able to come in and produce this anomaly detection. Now, as you can see here down here, you don't have to just select detect anomalies. I could have typed in, detect anomalies. So it has a natural language interface. But because I'd selected detect anomalies, you can go in and see, okay, we have immediate insight into exactly why we're seeing some anomalies. Most of them are looking like they're at store 2002.5. So that's where we're seeing a lot of anomalies. You can see that there's changes within sales adjustments. So at this point, I'm going to scroll over to 2002.5. We can see that, yes, here's that women's clothing. It's much higher than a lot of other places. We can see that, COGS is significantly higher than a lot of others. This could be based off of maybe the cluster or the cohort that it's responsible for, or the overall store size. So I can continue clicking in and drilling down to get more information or more, understanding about why we're seeing the variance of that particular store. So planning for stores, whether you're doing it in a dashboard, you're curating the user experience by bringing your already built dashboards into hubs, building out new reports, being able to have your store manager come in and look at, okay, what does my cash flow or P&L or balance sheet look like? All of that in one particular spot. A lot of times we talked about, Alex mentioned at the beginning, challenges with Excel-based planning. We see that a lot, and Adaptive allows us to be able to overcome a lot of the challenges that you would experience in Excel or in spreadsheet-like planning, but it still allows you to even get in and start to leverage things like machine learning forecast technology, anomaly detection. So you can see we've got agentic AI and natural language interface that's coming as well. So store comparison reporting for your regional managers or district managers, completely possible inside of Workday Adaptive Planning. So that was a quick look at a lot of what our customers use inside of Workday Adaptive Planning for store-based planning. But Alex, I know that we've got a few questions that are coming in, so I want to make sure that we save some time for questions and just feel that. Let's see. Is the Ask Workday AI only available in hubs? No, you can use the Ask AI inside of the reporting interface. Ask Workday is actually going to be available on type of other sheets as well. The experience that you have with Ask AI or Ask Workday is going to be dependent upon the sheet that you're in. Sometimes it'll be to source questions like how can I build a report or how can I build a dashboard. So it'll be available on a lot of different landing pages, not just inside of hubs.
Awesome. Thank you for jumping into that too. And then would love to just pull up my quick little visual for us as well. So just a couple of other questions I see here that we can address real quickly as we wrap up. But what we saw today, how customizable is this for our business? Can we create specific drivers around like pricing or promotions that we're running to be able to have it directly aligned to the way that we plan?
Yeah. And that's a question that we get all the time. And for those who are familiar with Workday Adaptive Planning know that this solution is completely configurable based on whatever your organization's needs are, right? If you need different metrics, different KPIs, different drivers, you can absolutely build those in. What we built inside of the demonstration is a lot of the common things that we see across customers, a lot of the best practices that we put in place, but absolutely possible to configure this based off of your organization's needs.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Matt. And another question I see we have here is kind of around permissioning too. We're talking about, robust data sets that we're looking at from an administrative perspective, but how do we manage permissions across stores or regions? And then from that, be able to customize out different reports or outputs for different audiences that we may be working with.
Yeah, so security really begins with the level structure. So we talked about it today. It was rolling from, region into district, district into our stores. So our store managers would be assigned a particular store. They would only have access to their planning dashboard for their particular store. The district manager would see the group of stores, the regional manager would see a group of districts. So we would start at that level, or where the foundation really of security and access comes from is our level structure. Now we can go a step further and put in what is called dimension access controls as well. So if there are particular departments within a store, maybe you've got department managers. Think about like maybe grocery store planning where we've got, bakery and we've got meat departments, or we've got, health and wellness. You could have different department managers have access to their departments, maybe across, stores or across regions, but you could really easily, set your permissions to go across departments or across stores, just based off of either dimension, but typically the primary is going to be the level structure.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And the last question I see there kind of leads us into our final statement here. So just around what would it look like if we wanted to bring this on for our business? So again, like Matt leaned on, adaptive planning is a completely configurable and customizable solution for our customers. So as one of the leading implementation partners in the space, we are proud to support our customers and prospective customers as they look to evaluate adaptive planning. So if you are interested in taking a closer look at what this would really look like for your business, we would love to have a follow-up conversation with you. You can reach out to us directly via the email listed here or via our website as well. But we really appreciate you taking the time to join us on today's webinar focused on connecting store-level planning across our organizations. And thank you again for the time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alex. And it looks like there actually is one more question that came in. It says, it looks like Hubs is mostly a use case for analysis reporting, whereas dashboards is more functionality to update and build scenarios. So the way that I like to think of Hubs is that it is dashboards on steroids, essentially. So you can take your dashboard and actually bring it into a hub. Hub, you can also have dedicated places for particular sheets, particular reports, a financials grouping section. Inside of your hub, you can also have, this is going to be where we'll start to see process manager and workflow will be stored inside of hubs as well. And then lastly, you can also have, in the bottom of your hub is actually access to task status for integrations that you may frequently need to be running as well. So Hubs takes all of your dashboard functionality and starts to layer more functionality on top with process manager workflow, integration updates, as well as reports. So again, Hubs, still a curated user experience, but I think that it takes dashboards and goes a little bit of a step further in terms of allowing that curated user experience.
Awesome. Thank you for catching that, Matt.
Yep.
All right. Well, with that, again, thank you all so much for the time. We would love the opportunity to dive in deeper with you. So please feel free to reach out to us directly, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Joanna.
Thanks, everyone.